Hello and welcome to the Tatiana Show, Legal Edition. Today we're going to be featuring a very good friend of mine, Pamela Morgan, who we're going to introduce in just a second, although I sort of gave you a preview of what that introduction will be like. But first I wanted to say hello. Hi Josh, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. It's spring is slowly heading towards us here in Berlin, which is always a wonderful thing because Berlin's winters are a bit tough to deal with. But yeah, I'm doing well. I'm really glad that we've got Pamela. I met her in Berlin when we sponsored Andreas's talk over here, and she's doing great stuff. So I'm very excited about today's show.
As am I. Did you guys have a brutal winter? Because I felt like the New York winter this year was extremely mellow, very unusual.
Actually, our winter was mellow as well. It just is dragging on. I just want to chill out in beer gardens and, sunny and work outside in our little garden out here.
Really?
And
You have all
and
that much time working in crypto that you just hang out in beer gardens? What kind of job is this that you managed?
I hang out with my laptop working.
Fair enough. That sounds a little bit more accurate because I don't necessarily notice you just vegging around town either.
No, that's true. That's true.
Um,
But I like to think I can.
well, yeah. Well, you've got the little back patio thing. So Pamela, we'd like to welcome you to the show today. Pamela Morgan is an attorney, a very, very good friend of mine, one of my absolute favorite speakers in Bitcoin, and she has this magical ability of making legal stuff not as sickening and terrifying as it really is. So, welcome to the show, Pam.
Why, thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. I'm really, really excited to chat about law and Bitcoin and nerd stuff with you.
Okay, great. Well, we're not going to keep it that nerdy. Actually, that's not true.
I'm here, so I'm pretty sure the nerd factor went up.
Nerd Factor 3000.
Yeah.
Cool. So, if people aren't familiar with your work, maybe you could give me a little bit of background on your legal kind of background and then also how you transitioned into Bitcoin.
Sure. So I've been practicing law for about 10 years now, and I've been in the Bitcoin space full time for over 2 years. Prior to finding Bitcoin, I was interested in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education and helping people start businesses and all of that kind of fun stuff. And then I found Bitcoin, and of course, once I realized it was going to change the world, I knew I wanted to be part of it. So I left the full-time world of entrepreneurship education and started practicing law full-time in the Bitcoin space. I started helping startups with all sorts of different things. I try to stay away from all of the regulatory nonsense because
Excitement?
a lot of other lawyers, yeah, exactly. A lot of the other lawyers do that, and what I'm much more interested in is how you're actually going to execute and how we can help you maintain a good and healthy company. So I started working with people using multi-sig for corporate governance and helping them separate tasks within their organizations so that we don't have one person embezzling money or we don't have fraud. It reduced hacking and basic loss of funds. It also helped management internally so that people were having discussions when they had to sign off on transactions. So I started using multi-sig in small businesses. It was also a really nice feature for them to say to investors, like, hey, listen, don't just give us money. We have this whole, process in place. You can give us money, and we're not going to have it, just disappear. You can even be a signer on the account if you want to. So that was a nice selling feature for a lot of startups. And that necessarily rolled somehow into people saying, hey, so now that we have this multi-sig, will you hold a third key? And I was like, no way. That's a terrible idea. I don't want to do that. It sounds really risky. No, no, no. And after people kept asking and asking and asking, finally I said, all right, well, what would that look like? So I started talking to really smart people in the industry. Andreas Antonopoulos is one of them, and he and I and Rick Kagan came together and started Third Key Solutions in March of last year. And Third Key Solutions is a key consulting and management company that's specifically designed to help people manage securely their Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, it's a really important feature or service, I should say, because humanity has had thousands of years of understanding how to secure things like gold or physical assets, but the last 20 years really of securing digital assets, and not and really the last 5 years in doing that well. So that's fantastic. It's a really important service. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, one of the things that differentiates us from other people in the space is we really try to stay true to the idea of customers controlling their own funds. So if you're going to give some company all of your Bitcoin and have them hold it for you and manage it for you, in my world, there's really no difference between that and a bank, right? If you're giving your money to someone else and they have full control over it, that's not really Bitcoin to me. So we try to ensure that people are able to maintain full control. That doesn't mean that someone doesn't hold one of their keys. It just means that if the customer or client at any time says, you know what, this isn't working for me, I want to end this, they can do it without any sort of barriers.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We hold people's keys here, and it's definitely something that we're looking at, not only for security for our members, but also regulatory wise. There's
Absolutely.
a whole gray zone in law to say you're not allowed to hold other people's funds on their behalf, and then you say, well, we don't. We hold a key that's one of the, and it starts really abstracting, and I think this is a really important and interesting thing that we'll watch out for in law when as an industry, to see how regulators will deal with multi-sig.
Well, I'm working on helping them with that, in that we are working on writing a paper that will highlight best practices and highlight the differences in traditional escrow, traditional custodial accounts, and what those legally look like versus what multi-sig looks like. And I think one of the things that we have to remember is that the law has rules on escrow because if you give your money to someone else, they'll steal it. Right? And so we have to have laws that say, okay, you can't steal it, and here are the things you can do, and here are the things you can't do. If through technology, though, we can divide that control and make it so that you can't actually steal the money, then we get to ask the question of, well, hey, do those laws really make sense anymore? Does the problem that we were trying to solve before still exist? And if it doesn't, then maybe these laws don't actually make sense. So I'm actually writing a paper about that now.
I would say also it would highlight the truth behind some of these regulations. Are they there to protect the consumer, or are they there to protect banks from having competition? Are they there to put so many barriers of entry in that startups can't compete? And having these sort of technologies really make that more obvious, because
absolutely, it forces the conversation, right?
Yeah.
It forces us to have a conversation. If we can provide consumer protection through the technology itself, then why do we still need these laws? What purpose are they serving? And let's be honest about that.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great thing. I love it when we get to rethink systems and rethink kind of systems that aren't actually working for people in a lot of ways. And that was one of the things that drew me to Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think a lot of these laws started off well-meaning, but they definitely fall for this regulatory capture, as they like to call it, where big institutions start writing the regulations, start pushing for more regulations, basically jump on top of this concept of protecting the consumer, but actually use it to protect themselves against competition. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen that throughout. I think, it's pretty clear if you look at even, what's happening in New York with Ben Lawsky, and the idea that the person who helped to legislate some of the most, I would say, sloppy legislation I've ever seen is now consulting for the very industry that he helped to get regulated. And so I think part of the danger in that is that the legislation is written so loosely that we're going to see some like selective prosecutions, right? It's not written clear enough so that people actually know, although it was passed under the auspices of this as being clear. I think everyone in industry knows that it's unclear, and so the interesting idea of this flip-flopping positions of a regulator moving to an industry position and industry people moving into regulatory positions, and this back and forth is something that is a real problem. And I think that this technology can help us kind of get outside of that, particularly in finance and banking.
Yeah, and I brought this up the other day. I said, when is law going to be written in code? Because there you have true logic gates, whereas a lot of laws are so vague that, like you said, you can have really selective prosecution of, oh, we don't like this, nudge, nudge, hey, judge, sort it out, and yeah, we'll sort you out. And it does happen all the time. It's not some tinfoil hat wearing thing. Big incumbent industries use regulations to protect themselves. And so writing code, and we're seeing the first steps in smart contracts, which I think is really super exciting.
Yeah, I do too. I want to jump in with something that I think a lot of people don't really think about when it comes to regulation, and that is that for those that have and what I mean by that is those that have large legal departments, those multinational companies, those that are well funded, the incumbencies. When regulation is passed, they have armies of lawyers who are looking at that regulation and going through it with a fine-tooth comb and saying, okay, how can we continue to do business? What can we do that will still be within the letter of the law, but allow us to maximize profits? Everyday people and startups don't have that. And so often, everyday people and startups and smaller companies end up paying the price because they're the ones who end up with cases that then clarify the law, right? And so a lot of times we don't think about this back and forth and this whole idea of, industry incumbents writing the law, and then they use that and have armies of lawyers to make sure that they can maintain their position. And I think that's an important point, and I am excited about smart contracts, and I am excited about kind of shifting those interpretations to code, I think.
So, and let me ask something. So if the power structures are not really geared up to allow like all the people at the top, right? You've got the government, you've got the banker guys,
Those are similar raw. I'm just gonna point that out.
Well, they're similar, cut from the same cloth, right? What can the industry do in order to put pressure to change those kinds of really corrupt systems? The purpose of Bitcoin in a lot of ways is to just provide an alternative so you can opt out of the system. That's what I really, really liked about it. But when you're a business and you're trying to function, it makes it really hard to do that if you're, in New York. New York is like a cesspool of corruption. And if the rest of the people in America are subject to the laws of the overlords, how can we take advantage of that technology properly? Do we just keep pushing back and hopefully, you know what I'm saying? Because maybe if they have the option, they won't be allowed legally to use the options that are, let's say, unregulated. You can't have a company that doesn't comply with their laws. They'll shut you down.
Yeah, you can't have a company that operates within the United States that doesn't comply with United States law, for sure.
Well, for example, sorry, there's a, I'm friends with Ross. I go to jail, talk to him, and he tells me that they've got tons, and this is in New York, that they've got tons of people that are not U.S. citizens, that never step foot in the United States, that they go out, the New York, I don't know, goon squad goes out there, they rip them out of their countries, and they bring them back to jail in America. And these are people that aren't even they never even lived here. So what if you're a Bitcoin company and somebody accidentally has a transaction with New York? Well, then what's going to happen? Schumer's going to send his goons and he's going to go get more people. I don't know how that works.
I don't know how that works either, but my guess is that if you're not well connected or don't have friends in high places, it's possible. The question really is, this is the problem with selective prosecution, and this is the problem with our legal system being so far behind the reality that most of us live in today, right? these geographic limitations and these laws that are written to reflect, horse and carriage societies where it was a big deal to go, 50 miles was like, ooh. And now, we're flying all over the world and we're doing business all over the world. And then we have these barriers and these intentional nationalistic barriers that are set up to both protect but also exclude other people. And the problem with these barriers is that they don't reflect the reality of doing business today. And unfortunately, I'll say, the law is slow and legal systems are very slow to change. You might
Very
be
encouraging.
No, I mean, I would love to say that I think that things are going to change quickly. I don't think they are. Right now, I saw a really interesting project today about open sourcing legal research. So the idea that legal research has been held back and scientific research has been held back and away from the internet and the open source community and kind of sharing information is calculated. But it seems at the same time ridiculous to me. Like, wait a minute, why can't everyone do legal research and contribute to legal research databases? Why do only lawyers have access to this? Well, the reason is because it's a profit-making machine, right? Lawyers have to do legal research. Therefore, if we can keep the legal research, the quality legal research behind a paywall, we can extract profits from everyone who needs this research. And so the idea of moving to open source law is fascinating to me, and I love it. But part of me is like, wait a minute, why hasn't this already happened? Like, I feel like we're so far behind in even encrypting communications, for example. Like, most of my clients either don't have GPG keys or don't actually communicate encrypted until I teach them. So part of the learning curve is teaching them how to encrypt their communications. And it's like, wait a minute, why aren't we all already doing this? So I think that it's not just the law, but I think it's also our actions that kind of lag behind because we're all busy. Like, everyone has kind of more important things to do.
Yeah, that's why I was really impressed with WhatsApp basically onboarding 1 billion people into the world of encryption in one foul swoop. Amazing, absolutely amazing, and so
bold considering the political landscape.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really fascinating to feel the difference that I feel personally when I'm chatting with someone post the encryption. I feel a lot freer. I feel like I can say stuff without just that little niggle in the back of my mind thinking, someone could be listening. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad. It's just, do you know what I mean? Like, if I was to send, I don't know, some really personal information about some health or something like that or whatever.
But
yeah,
even if not, right? Like, we live in homes that have blinds or curtains on our windows for a reason. Because we don't live in glass houses because we don't want everyone seeing what we're doing all the time. Maybe that just means you don't want people seeing that you're sitting on the couch. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. And this idea that we have to defend ourselves every time we want privacy, I think is a real societal problem. And I think this is something that we really need to push back on. Because privacy is not the same. Wanting privacy is not the same as wanting to do bad things. And I think that, the other side has done a really good job at saying, like, well, I mean, if you've got nothing to hide, why do you care? And I think the simple answer is, I care because I'm a human being. I think all human beings want privacy at some points in their lives. Otherwise, glass bathrooms for everyone. Like, no one wants that.
Yeah. I don't want glass bathrooms.
Yeah, me neither. I'm just saying, right?
Well, people act differently when they know they're being monitored. I mean, they've done studies on that. And I don't really, look, I read 1984 a long time ago, and that book scared the hell out of me. And I read it later on as an adult, and it scared me even more, especially in the age that we're in right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, did you guys see they're making a Snowden movie?
Yeah,
no.
It looks amazing.
Oliver Stone is making
Oliver
it.
Stone. And
really?
The trailer looks fantastic. It's
yeah,
really
I think that they're making a hero out of, because sometimes I think that all three of us are kind of ideologically driven, right? And there's different points where you start thinking, man, mankind is doomed. But I think if you think about the fact that the Snowden movie is being put out by Oliver Stone, I mean, I haven't seen it yet. Maybe it won't be that favorable, but I imagine that it's going to make him into a bit of a hero. And I think that that kind of approval and thumbs up from society is also really important, because when people think about Snowden, sometimes they look to the left, they look to the right, they say, okay, you know, what's going on? What do my friends say? But if it becomes socially acceptable to think that what Snowden did was a service to the country, then I think that more people would kind of join into that bandwagon. I think that's great for the causes that I think Bitcoin strives to bring into focus.
Do you know if Snowden is involved at all?
In the movie? No,
Yeah.
I literally saw it yesterday or something, and I didn't even watch the whole trailer, but I thought to myself, good job, my people. Keep growing. Like I just wanted to kind of grow that, you know, little rebel mind. So I'm like, it's starting.
Yes, I love it.
I just wanted to also mention that, you know, the argument that, look, if you're not doing anything wrong, then why do you care, is really, 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 really dangerous. Because if you have a society where everything is being watched by a single party, then that party has ultimate control. And I'm not talking about your silly, oh, I ate a baguette and here's a picture of my cat. I'm talking about the central authority saying, look, judge, we know you like this, this, and this in your fetishes, and if you don't do this, this, and this, we're going to just expose you. And by the way, Mr. Policeman, and so after a while, it's not your things; it's the society starts getting very quickly corrupted and very quickly controlled by a single party. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, you know, this is not strange. So for attorneys, we have client confidentiality. This is in our ethical rules, right? And so we know that clients won't speak to us unless they can speak to us in confidence, unless they know that we can't share it. And so we're prevented from sharing information of our clients. And it's not me that has the right, it's the client that has the right to privacy. And so why that would be, you know, thrown out the window, or why we have this idea that, you know, privacy isn't something that we all value now, I don't know where that came from, but I think it's a fallacy. I think it's not true. And I think it's an easy, you know, quick tagline, but I think if we actually analyze it in any meaningful way, we can't help but come to the conclusion that society is going to be worse off, that all of our relationships are going to be worse off if we have a surveillance state. I think we all agree on that. We come to agreement? Is that what just happened?
Yeah, see, that's how it works in Bitcoin. It's not all bickering and backstabbing.
It's consensus. Well done.
Yeah. Wow.
All right, great. No, so now that we solved the security problem worldwide, exactly. What else do we need to tackle? How about death?
Woo, all right. One of my favorite topics.
Well, I did, I'm sort of joking, but I did want to talk to Pam a little bit about an article that she wrote. But before we get into that, we're coming up on the half hour, so I just want to put out a couple notifications to the community. First of all, I want to thank Kirk Phillips. He is sponsoring this episode. He's from the Bitcoin CPA. Pam, you guys need to talk. I'm going to connect you guys. But anyway, what he did was he created these really, I mean, first of all, is it Bitcoin CPA, right? The bitcoincpa.com. But he's also creating courses in order to teach people how to process their taxes and like what they need in order to do it. I know that we just missed the tax deadline. Some people maybe did, maybe didn't. But basically, he is kind of trying to teach people how to work their way through the weeds, and I think that's a really valuable service. So if people want to know about that, and he also wrote a book, they can go to thebitcoincpa.com. Thank you for your sponsorship and patronage. Next week is consensus. So next week we're doing the anti-consensus party. That's what I'm unofficially calling my show with Zhao Tong. Do you guys know Zhao Tong?
Yes.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it's
Sure,
going to be
amazing.
super fun. So Monday night at the Mean Fiddler from 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., which is at 47th and 8th in New York, right after, I guess, the first day of consensus. Once you're done, working with the banking and regulators, you'll probably need a stiff drink. So, I mean, you could always go to Coin Center dinner if you have $250 to drop on a plate to hang out with people that you already see all the time. You can go. I'm really bad. I really need to clean this up. Anyway, I'm just kidding. If people want to come and have a good time, me and Zao are going to be doing a show. A portion of the proceeds are going to benefit Free Ross, of course, a thing I'm very passionate about. And then Tuesday night, there's a party that CoinSource, Snapcard, and KeepKey are doing a private event with me and Wax and PR. So if people want to find out more about that, they can write me, cryptomediahub.com. And that's all the plugging that we have for today. So Pam, you recently wrote an article about death in Bitcoin, and I was depressed reading this article. I didn't like it. I mean, I thought it was well written, but I'm thinking I'm too young to die. I don't want to think about that. I don't have time to worry about death. But then, last week a very sad thing happened, which is Prince passed away. One of my favorite artists. I think we can all agree he's an absolute genius. And
Yeah.
when Prince died, he didn't have a will. And so all of his songs that he's been using are just getting like shredded across the internet. They're just burning the hell out of them because he really took a lot of care to keep his music off of public forums. He believed that people should go to him to get the music. And now his sister is set to get all this money, and then the government's going to get it. But it drove home to me, wow, any day, boom. He didn't expect that. I don't think he expected. He was 57 years old. I don't think he was going to croak. And all of a sudden, all of his belongings and everything that he worked for is sort of scattered to the wind. Um, Pam, you've spent some time thinking about that. God bless you, because I know I can't. So tell me what you concluded and a little bit about this article you put up in Brave New Coin.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm super sad that Prince passed. I'm a huge fan, and the aftermath of what's going on is kind of scary for a lot of people, not just artists, right? So what a lot of people don't know is that every state in the United States has something called an intestacy law. And basically all that is it's a default law, like a default font. If you open a Google Doc, your default font is going to be Arial 11, right? You start typing, you don't change the font, it's Arial 11. Every state in the United States has a default law that says, hey, if you die without a will, this is what's going to happen to your stuff. And also, by the way, you have to come to probate court. And also, by the way, you have to pay estate tax if it's larger than a certain amount. And the estate itself has to pay that tax. So if you have a will, or if you have a trust or some other legal mechanism, which I'm not going to bore you with, but there are lots of options. But if you don't take any of those options, the intestacy law applies. And that's what we're seeing with Prince. So now his sister, and I don't know what the intestacy laws are in the state, but people are saying that his sister is inheriting everything, which means that anyone who was living with him, any close friends, any sort of, if he had animals or people who helped him throughout his life, they get nothing. And the sister will then have a big fat tax bill that she'll have to pay for inheriting all of that money. So it's not an ideal situation from really anyone's perspective. And I know it's kind of depressing, but if we don't think about these things, first of all, it doesn't have to be. For those of you who are kind of control freaks, you can be like, all right, I get to control things even after I'm gone, which a lot of people kind of like. They kind of like the feeling of being able to have some say, even if they're not really around to have some say. And so if you look at it from that perspective, your stuff is going to be distributed. The question is, do you want to have a say in it? And if you do, then you got to do something. And in the cryptocurrency space, especially with Bitcoin, especially with Ethereum, especially with any of these other assets where we're holding private keys, if you're keeping your private keys private, which you should, if something happens to you, how are your heirs going to be able to access it? For most people, the answer is they're not going to. So then the question becomes, how do we balance security with succession or inheritability? And these are the same sorts of questions that you ask in a business, right? So you ask the same sorts of resilience questions, security questions, succession questions in a business that you do for an individual. So I wrote this article all about how to do kind of DIY estate planning, because most people that I talk to in the cryptocurrency space have not even considered what will happen to any of their currencies if something happens to them, right? They're like you. They're like, I don't want to deal with this. This sounds terrible. It's depressing. Don't
Hopefully
want
they're
any part
not
of it.
as irresponsible as I am, but yes, probably.
I think you're reflective of the norm.
Oh, good.
So, the thing is that, and it seems like a huge project, right? Like it seems like, oh my God, this is way too big. I don't want to deal with this. So I wrote an article to kind of help walk people through the process. And it's just 7 steps that you go through, and you ask yourself some questions, and you sit down and kind of have an hour, to kind of write down some things and figure out, do you really need estate planning? If you've got 2 Bitcoin and you don't think Bitcoin's going to go to the moon, then, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you leave a note, under your mattress and say like, hey, I've got 2 Bitcoin, try to get in my computer, something like that. But if you've got a substantial amount of cryptocurrency, usually we see people that are like 25,000 US dollars or more, then most people say, okay, this is too much for me to just leave to chance. This is too much for me. I would want my family to be able to inherit this. So what do I do? And this article that I wrote kind of goes through the steps. And we at Third Key Solutions offer something called Solutions Discovery. Have you heard of this?
No, tell us more. Tell us more.
Oh, yay, okay. I don't want to bore you. If you already know what I'm going to say, I don't want to bore you.
No.
So Solutions Discovery is for those people who are like, yeah, I've got, a pretty significant amount of cryptocurrency. I'm not really sure if I'm storing it securely or not. I mean, I have it in a wallet or two, but, I'm not really confident. I haven't really tested it. Some people are using paper wallets that they haven't touched in a few years. And they're like, well, I should probably do something else. And also, while I'm doing that, maybe I should think about succession planning. So we at Third Key Solutions offer something called Solutions Discovery. And it's really quick and easy, and we walk you through the whole process. It's $1,000. It's payable in Bitcoin, of course. And it's about a 2-week process. What we do is we first have a consultation with you. We talk with you for about 30 minutes or so. And we figure out, what are you using now? What do you like? What are you not using? How technically savvy are you? What are your goals? All that kind of stuff. Then we go away, and in 2 weeks or less, you have a step-by-step plan that says, okay, here are anywhere between 2 and 4 solutions that we think will be really great for you. Here are the risks of each of them. Here's how to implement it, including like a list of supplies. Like, hey, you should get this from Amazon.com, or you should get this, including a full list of supplies, everything you need on how to implement it yourself. We don't hold a key as part of that. We give you the tools to securely construct your own secure storage. If you want us to hold a key, we can do that as an add-on service, but that's something we discuss later. Then, if you decide that you want us to hold a key, if you decide you want to, engage us again, we'll help you do testing. We'll walk you through the whole process, and that way you can feel warm and fuzzy. Okay, listen, this is done. Like, I know what the plan is. I have a written plan. I don't have to deal with this again, which a lot of our clients are really happy about.
Yeah, it's a fantastic, really, really important service. But the people, and this is something that's really it's a problem in the West. People in the West generally don't like to talk about death.
Yeah.
And the fact is, a part of life is death. And to be prudent about what's going to happen, how your estate management deals with things afterwards is super important. And, even if you think, well, I don't want to think about it, think about the family members who a lot of the time end up fighting so hard that it destroys the family.
Absolutely.
Because you haven't given proper instruction of what you want. And so, it is absolutely empirical. And we secure thousands of people's solid bullion in one of the largest bullion vaults in Europe. And we notice, our customers, while we are a Bitcoin gold only business, they're generally a little bit older and start thinking about this stuff. And so they verify their accounts without us really needing them to, because they don't hold that much. But they do it because if they don't, the gold is secured in their name as their property, and if they don't, then their estate's management is going to have to prove that that email address belonged to the deceased, and that can become expensive. So people generally start thinking. So it's interesting seeing the dynamic between gold bugs who have become Bitcoin bugs and understand this, and the young kids who are like, crypto, fantastic, and still haven't grasped how fragile life is, and that it can go like that, especially if you're on pharmaceuticals.
Well, and it can, yeah, well, and it can also, a lot of times people don't realize that it's not just for death, right? It's like if something happens to you, if for whatever reason you get hit by a bus and you need money for medical expenses, or you need money for physical therapy, or you need money for whatever reason and you're not able to access it, do you want that cryptocurrency to be able to be used for that? Some people do, some people don't. But to give your family members choice, and I think what you said, Josh, is so important. There are so many families that are torn apart by improper planning, and when someone passes away, unfortunately, it kind of does bring out the worst in people. And if you can prevent that by having a clear plan, you can really help to save your family in a lot of instances, because then it's clear, it's on paper. People aren't wondering, oh, well, grandma said that I could get this ring, and well, she told me I could have the ring. You end up with these lifelong feuds for no reason. And I think that, it is a really nice thing that you can do for your family.
Yeah, it's the perfect storm. I mean, there's a lot of emotion because people are grieving, and part of grieving is then anger, and then that anger gets taken out in that, and then you add greed to that, and forget about it. So yeah, do yourself a favor, folks. That's really important, really, really important.
Yeah, and a lot of times, I mean, for not every state in the U.S., but some states allow you to do something called a holographic will. Do you know what that is?
Wow, it sounds very modern for a government.
I know it sounds like super high tech. It's not. All it is a handwritten will that you sign yourself. So this doesn't mean, like, estate planning doesn't mean, oh wow, I have to have 10 grand to hire a lawyer and draw up all of these documents and I have to read them all and it's going to be awful. Like, that's not required in a lot of states. Of course, if you're in the U.S. or if you're abroad, you need to make sure and check with your local authorities. But there are so many great legal resources now that you don't necessarily have to hire someone to draft it, especially if if your stuff is pretty simple, and if you don't have a lot of different, like, mixed family heir sorts of situations.
I have a question. If somebody's not in crypto, is there a way that they could benefit from this? I mean, in terms of administering their wishes after their death, is there some sort of a smart contract function of this service that could help with people that are not in crypto, or is this only for crypto people?
I mean, so right now it's only for crypto people, but there are people who are working on smart contracts that will effectively be like a trust. So for those of you who might not be familiar with a trust is simply, usually, there are lots of different kinds of trusts, but in this context, it's a trust or a trusted third party, typically a bank, will have all of the money, or sometimes it's like stocks or bonds, and they'll have all of the assets. And then they are directed by the trust. They have them, but they don't own them. They're held for the benefit of someone else, and those people are called beneficiaries. And so the trustee holds the asset, and they distribute, for example, the proceeds on that trust for a certain period of time, right? So let's say that something bad happens to me, and I set up a trust for you, Tatiana, and I say every year for the next 20 years, give Tatiana, 10% or 5% of whatever this amount of money is. And so if you know that there is a distribution that's going to happen at a set time every year with a set amount or a set percentage, in theory, you could automate that using a smart contract.
I like the future of smart contracts. I hope that they would do something for musicians.
There's so many cool things happening with smart contracts. I saw yesterday a boardroom that is basically built as a smart contract. So the boardroom is totally transparent. Any shareholder has tokens that then can be, it's just what's happening in the smart contract world is disrupting stuff so quickly that governments will be left there. We see tablecloths being whipped off the table and leaving everything standing. I think we're going to, this is the type of thing that's happening, is that governments will wake up and the tablecloth is gone, and they don't know how to they won't know how to deal with it, because the old laws just aren't written for what is about to come. It's stunning.
I think we need to be really smart, though, as not to use the same word, but smart as we design smart contracts, because number one, moving to a fully code-based society, for those of us that are disenfranchised with the traditional judicial system, like on its face sounds awesome, right? But yesterday I was thinking about, like, what does this look like? If we actually play this out, what does it look like? And all I could think about was like the dreaded call center. So I have an account with Discover, a credit card with Discover. And do either of you have a Discover credit card?
No, I got rid of
Okay.
all mine. I'm out of here with credit cards.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I wish I could, but I can't. So I've got a Discover, and then I also have some other credit cards. And Discover is my favorite card for one reason, and most people that I talk to have the same reason. Here it is. When you call Discover, you get a human being.
What?
I know.
What are these things? What are human beings?
Not just a human being with a script. You get a human being that can actually solve your problem. You don't have to escalate to like, okay, clearly this isn't working out. Can I talk to a supervisor? Can I talk to your supervisor? Can I talk to your supervisor? Hours and hours and hours on the phone. No. That doesn't happen with Discover. In my experience, at least, every time I have a situation, I call them, I get a human being on the phone who's empowered to make changes, who can say, oh yeah, you know what, that shouldn't have happened, let me reverse it. And I started thinking about that in the context of smart contracts. And then I started getting scared, because I'm like, oh my God, we could end up in a world where it's nothing but press 1, press 2, right? The equivalent of this, where you don't actually have a human being that can go in and make changes and go, oh yeah, that really isn't fair, or yeah, there was a glitch in the system and it didn't, it wasn't programmed right. And the idea that we're going to be able to create flawless programming that will never behave in an unexpected way, I think we all know is untrue. And so I was kind of looking at it from the other perspective and being like, oh wow, we really need lawyers and programmers and lots of other people to come together and like walk through these smart contract systems and like do our best to prevent the hell that is press 2. That option is not available. Like
yeah, it's like that law is too fuzzy, the human law, and smart contracts are too logical that there's no gray zone, there's no
sense.
There's spectrum.
Well, and I think that there will be, right? Like this idea of moving everything to a fully automated smart contract, I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. And the reason is because it works fine with virtual assets, but when you start trying to interact with the real world, then it gets a little dicey. And then you have people involved. And when people are involved, there's always interpretation and there's miscommunication. And so I don't think that I think smart contracts will help to prevent a lot of disputes. But I don't think smart contracts are going to prevent all disputes. I think what will happen is that we're going to see different kinds of disputes and people in different positions than they would be with simple like paper promises, right? Because contracts right now, that's all they are. They're just paper promises back and forth. Where when we have code promises, now the code's going to enforce it. But you still might end up on the wrong end of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what I love about Open Bazaar, is that you have these smart contracts in place. Well, they're multi-sig, which is a type of smart contract, I guess. But at the end of the day, you can have a marketplace of judges. A marketplace of judges that have to compete to be as fair as possible, otherwise they stop getting business. So if one judge is found to be corrupt, then they just go out of business. And so they will ask for two sides of the story and really make sure they get it right. Whereas when you have a monopoly on judges like we do with our current society, well, you know, it's whatever they feel like. If they wake up on the wrong side of the bed, 20 years.
I gotta jump in and talk about Justice Coin for 1 second. Can I, Tatiana? Is that
Yeah,
right?
go ahead.
Okay. So I totally hear what you're saying, but one of the problems with having a single judge or even just a few judges is that a lot of times when we make decisions, we think that they're incredibly fair. But one side or the other is either better at persuading you with their opinions, or maybe one side doesn't have all of the information that the other side has. And so you end up with an unfair outcome, even though on its face it looks like from the evidence presented, right, it was a fair outcome. And so you have these issues. And so one of the ideas I had really early on that I'm still in love with, that I still want to do, if anyone out there wants to do this with me, contact me. So this idea of having, for lack of a better term, justice coin, but you don't have to have a coin and it doesn't have to be justice. The idea is that you have a broad range of arbitrators or mediators, and you have a big pool, right? So Josh, you'd register and you'd say, yeah, I have these skills. I'm an expert in Bitcoin, and I'm an expert in gold, and I'm an expert in valuation and security and all of these things. And Tatiana, you would register and you would say, I'm an expert in, crypto assets and music and the music industry and, media. And so, and I would register and say, okay, I'm an expert in multi-sig and, law stuff and whatever. And then when a
And jazzercise.
And jazzercise, that's true. When no, this is all true, but anyway, that's for the Tatiana show with Pamela Morgan round 2. So the idea is that you have a bunch of people who register their specialties and their knowledge areas, and then they become part of this global pool. And when you have a dispute, the system would reach out to, say, 100 different people that had these specific knowledge in these specific areas that were at issue. And they would all evaluate the evidence, and they would come back with a consensus, right? And so each one would operate individually. And the idea with that is that if you had people who had specialized knowledge in the specific issue, you would probably get a better outcome, because even if the person wasn't good at articulating, like, oh, this is what we always do, you would be like, Josh, you'd be like, no, that's not what we do in the gold world, right? Like, that's not actually how business is done, and no, you shouldn't have thought that was going to happen. But me, I would have no idea. Like, if I were looking at that, I'd be like, I'm not an expert in how gold is traded. I don't know how that works.
Right.
And so I think one of the shortcomings of our current judicial system is we rely on one person and we expect them to have knowledge in everything. And actually, in the United States, we expect the lawyers who are advocating for their client to educate the judge on all of the relevant issues. And if you just look at that on its face and you think about a caseload for a judge, the idea that they could be an expert on any of these things is pretty ridiculous. I mean, really.
It's ludicrous, isn't it?
It's ludicrous,
when you
right?
Think about it, it's just absolutely pathetic.
Right,
Yeah,
but we don't have to do that anymore. Like, we have the internet. Like, we have the internet, people. Like, we can communicate across borders. We don't have to be geographically locked in to these, to these systems. And while they made perfect sense, centuries ago, they don't seem to really make sense anymore. And so I think we can do it better. And I think that's why I'm so excited about Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency space, is because I see so many opportunities for us to make so many systems better.
So when are we gonna have that? I like that. It's like the people's court.
Yeah, well, I have to get people who want to do this.
I do.
Yeah.
I just can't really contribute anything useful except for complaining.
Right. So
like, listen, this system sucks.
If anyone wants to fund that idea, you let me know. But yeah,
how much do you think that would take? Do you think that's something that would be difficult to make?
I don't know. And one of the underlying issues that we haven't talked about yet, even with Open Bazaar or even with anyone who holds a third key as an arbitrator, is that one of the most important things you want when you have an arbitration decision, or when you have someone coming in and making a final decision, is that it's actually final. And there are some legal ways that you can use in our current legal system, and the magic sword here is arbitration. Arbitration that is compliant with the New York Treaty. And I'm not going to go into all the legal details because everyone will fall asleep. But the idea is that there are more than 150 countries that have signed on to this convention. And what they say is, if you have an arbitration award, which is a court judgment in the world of arbitration, if you have an arbitration award and that arbitration award was conducted in accordance with these rules, then all of the local courts in all 150 countries will enforce that arbitration award. And that matters because it will prevent people from going to, okay, I'm going to have my open bazaar judge decide something. Oh, I don't like how that came out. Now I'm going to go to my local court and try to get a judgment, right? We want to avoid that. And so one really interesting legal way, we can use the current legal system to create enforceable arbitration awards, but it has to be in compliance with the law as it is. And it's not that hard to do. It's just a lot of people aren't really doing it that way. So then you have an issue where, like, okay, if I'm an arbitrator, but I'm not, if I hold myself out to be an arbitrator, but I'm not actually following these rules, then you, Tatiana, if you were a buyer or seller, could actually sue me and go, hey, Pamela decided that she sided with this other person. They wronged me out of X amount of dollars, and go to your local court in New York and pull me in if you knew that I was, your third-party arbitrator. So there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of reward, there's a lot of opportunity to design really cool systems that can serve our space. We're just not there yet.
Okay, well, I'd like to be there.
Fantastic.
Pushing toward the light.
Yeah.
I mean,
making progress.
Without justice is really, it's really hard to consider yourself free without justice,
I want to tell you something really quick before we go.
Sure.
I was in Rio when the Brazilian president was impeached. When she wasn't actually impeached, but they did the first vote to impeach her. And what was really, really powerful was it was like midnight, and all of a sudden you heard this rumbling through the streets, and you heard people screaming, "Justice, justice, justice." And it was such a powerful moment, and it just reminded me, if we ever forget about how important justice is, it is one of the most important things that we as human beings, we always seek to find justice. Whether we find it in a court system, whether we find it on the street, whether we find it, behind a closed door, we can't help but seek justice. And so I think that any system that provides us with true justice is a good system.
Well said, very well said. Wow. If all lawyers were this interesting to talk to, I'd be a very poor man. So I would spend hours just yapping away at them.
Pam, so before we wrap it up, as you know, we are being broadcast on many stations, and including Let's Talk Bitcoin. So we have a magic word. What is the magic word for today? I think we already know what it is.
Oh, we do? It can't be the same magic word we had last time.
I thought it should be justice. But I guess
agree.
Yeah, I felt like we were all on there.
I agree. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Yeah.
All right, good. So the magical word of the day is justice for this show. Pam, where can people catch up with you and find out more about Third Key and see more of your writing and all that stuff?
You can find me on Twitter at Pamela JD, PamelawJD. You can find me at empoweredlaw.com. And those articles that are posted on that blog are primarily for lawyers, but I try to make them accessible for everyone. So please, take a look. And then you can also find Third Key Solutions at thirdkey.solutions, and that's the key consulting, management, and solutions discovery company.
Excellent. I'm really happy that you are on with us. Josh, you have any parting words about Voltoro today?
Yeah, well, it's people are trading gold like crazy because of this volatility of Bitcoin. People are taking profits off the table. And what's beautiful is they're taking profits off the table and not going back to fiat. They're going back either into an alt like Ethereum or into bullion. And it's just wonderful to see that, hey, we don't need this paper debt-based stuff anymore. We can, and it's just, I just get excited about it every time. But we've got, we have to go, so I'll hold myself back. But if people want to get in contact with me, It's Joshua at Voltoro, or you can check out voltoro.com. We secure gold in top-tier Swiss bullion vaults for you.
Excellent. All right, very cool. Well, thank you everyone for listening. My name's Tatiana Moroz. Check me out on tatianamoroz.com. Or if you have any advertising, marketing, or PR needs for the Bitcoin space, go to cryptomediahub.com. And yeah, I hope to see everybody at the Zhaotong party Monday, May 2nd, I think it is. Yeah, I think that's the date. No, May 3rd. 8 o'clock at the Mean Fiddler. Proceeds going to Free Ross. Thank you to our sponsor, the BitcoinCPA.com. I don't know. Lots of excitement going on. So we hope to see you all next week. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.